Okay, good morning everybody. Because of the nature of my background, my presentation will be somewhat different to Siobhan's. I'll probably be concentrating a bit more on the nuts and bolts of administering the scheme and getting through. So, like Siobhan, I was out collecting money as well, and it is not straightforward. But just to give you an idea of Boyle to start with, hopefully some of you have visited some of the attractions like Lough or King House, or indeed Boyle Abbey. We're very lucky that it has an abundance of both historical assets and water outdoor assets as well. And it's very much, I suppose, our tourism jewel in the crown. The population is around 2,500. Would have been significantly higher in a much more condensed area in the past. So it's very much a town that has spread out. Historically, a vibrant market town, and it's also very much known for the Boyle Arts Festival. I suppose, like everyone else, and it's been mentioned in the first presentation, we're all working towards Project Ireland 2040, all about rejuvenating towns, reversal of decline, distinctive settlements, rural town regeneration, and increased residential density. Brian, my colleague, is here in the audience who would have been worked on Boyle 2040. So that really is trying to give local effect to Project Ireland. And we were lucky that that had been done probably about a year before we applied for the HDI. And that had set out a menu of projects to address the Project Ireland aspirations. So I'll come back to it later to show you some of the projects, not just in HDI, but in other funding streams that we've got as a result of that approach. Our objectives specifically for the HDI were to have a decreased number of vacant properties, to retain the unique heritage aspect of this important street. It's probably one of our most historical streets in the whole county. Create a desirable place to live, visit and do business, and to increase visitor numbers and dwell time. So we have a lot of people, say in the region of 270,000 people coming to Lough. But when you come into King House, which is on this street, the numbers are very much lower, much closer to 20,000, 20,000. So why Main Street? It is in the heart of the historic town. There's dual aspect potential. I'm not sure if you can see from the drawing, but we concentrated on the front facing facade, but there's long gardens in most of the properties at the back, and then that backs on to Boyle River. And on the far side of it, I don't know if I can highlight it, just along here is the old Royal Hotel site, which we're currently developing into an enterprise centre under RRDF and Town and Village. So what it means is that the people along the street in the study area will have the benefit of being on this street, but also can develop out onto the backlands here and out onto a street promenade. So there's definitely huge potential on the street. So several buildings are on the NIAH. It's in an architectural conservation area. It's primarily 3-storey terraces with residences over commercial premises. A lot of interesting features on the houses on the street. Victorian and modern shop fronts, cornices, window hoods and mouldings enliven what is otherwise, I suppose, an austere street. Exceptionally high residential and commercial vacancy. I think we had there's people living in only 3 or 4 of the houses along the street. There is 5 commercial premises on the street. But as a result of the HDI, we now have a number of people starting to do up the interiors as well. Exceptionally, as I say, high residential and commercial vacancy. So we felt that the HDI might help us do something with that. So I mentioned earlier Boyle 2040 and the suite of projects. So since we started working on Boyle 2040, the council bought the Royal Hotel site, which was a big move to make, I suppose, before the major funds had come on stream. A multi-centred offering, so Lincoln, where you got a reduced entrance if you bought a ticket for Lough, King House and Boyle Abbey, so just trying to encourage people to come in. We've just nearly completed, we're at the last phase of a cycle corridor linking Lough to Boyle Town and we got funding under Outdoor Recreation 2018 for that. The demolition of the newer part of the Royal Hotel site, we got funding for that under Town and Village Renewal, and we're now completing the design phase to turn that into an enterprise centre and Riverside Promenade, which I refer there will, I suppose, hugely benefit in terms of dual aspect. And in December we have got Destination Towns funding from Fáilte Ireland, again for the area adjacent to the HDI project and linking across to the Royal Hotel site. So in numbers, in terms of our HDI, there was 20 folios on the street, 18 properties from that, 14 people expressed an interest and 11 proceeded. So again, like Siobhan, you will have dropouts. We did have more interest even. I think probably 16 owners turned up at the initial consultation, but it was down to 11 in the end. What was eligible in what we applied for was to repair and upgrade external facades and roofs, preventative maintenance to the roofs, gutters, chimneys, external render, windows and shop fronts. I'll come back to that in a minute because there was a change. Visual improvements to the exterior of the building, so painting of rendered facades, the joinery and ironwork, removal of redundant cables, aerials, burglar alarm boxes and fixings, so really just tidying the whole thing up. And the upgrading of signage to the shop fronts and putting on Chinese hat type cowls complete with anti-bird mesh. So we did an awful lot of consultation, and we had a different approach to Mayo County Council in the sense that we didn't publicly advertise it. We'd identified the area in advance. So through land registry and local knowledge, we identified the owners. That in itself took a few weeks. We invited each owner, and that was based on land registry, so we wouldn't necessarily always have had the right owner or going to the right address. So we relied on our area office and on the town team to help us where we weren't getting anyone coming back. Meetings with the owners in King House, and Michael O'Boyle and Romy Cants from Boda Architects worked with us on that and were supervising the whole project. And we really benefited from the fact that they had done a similar project the year before. When people didn't turn up, again, another letter was issued to them. Then Michael would have done a property inspection on a cherry picker. When that report was written up, it was sent out again to the owners. And then we held a one-to-one meeting again. And it was at that stage then people were asked whether they were interested or not. We then went out to tender, and it was only once we had the tender price and the cost that we asked, we had the final sign up, and I suppose, as you can imagine, that's where we had a bit of dropout. Our percentage was 30%, and that was on learning from Michael's experience the year before, where when there's dropouts, your overall preliminary costs stay the same. And I would actually suggest that it should be higher than 30%. And then we had the formal sign-up. In terms of the tender, our first challenge was we had no response on e-tenders. So again, that caused a delay. And again, keeping the owners, we had a certain time frame given to them, so that slowed us down. We entered into negotiation with those who had expressed an interest on e-tenders and experienced local builders. So we eventually got a number of quotations in. We met with the owners then to outline what was possible within the budget. So at this stage, I suppose the costs were higher than we had originally anticipated, and the second thing is we'd lost some time. So two things needed to drop off: the window repairs and the chimney repairs. The chimney repairs because the cost of scaffolding, cantilever scaffolding from both sides in order to do the chimneys would not have been within our budget to do. We did have a couple of people threaten to completely pull out of the scheme if their roofs and chimneys weren't done, but I suppose we played hardball in the sense that we had always emphasised it was competitive, and they did come back into the scheme. Revised scope of works again was agreed with the owners, and match funding. We collected all match funding before any work started, and we were very strict on that because it was otherwise very strong risk that we'd be left carrying additional costs. So our works actually commenced in early August. Some learning time, you definitely need to have your conservation architect ready to go in place, and the second thing is the project that we're working on for this year, we're already looking at who the owners are so that we'd have that piece of work done. So should we be lucky enough to be selected, we'd be hitting the ground a bit quicker. Challenging environment to get a contractor because there's a mix of skills. So the contract is relatively low in considering the market we're in, where you have RRDF, URDF funding. So they're not inclined to go for these jobs because they can't make as much on them. We ended up with an excellent contractor, thankfully, in the end. Owner buy-in, ownership may affect the ability to buy in. So you're left with some properties aren't registered, some are in probate. We had 7 siblings owning one house. Initially they didn't want to buy in because one person turned up and said no. And then his sister rang and said no. Yes, the family had met again and they wanted in. So you're dealing with, by the time you're finished, you know everybody's family circumstances as well as everything else. Communication, I suppose, important property owners are kept up to date at all times. Our time slipped, and I think that's inevitable. That's even with the learning we'd got through Michael's previous experience. But you have to keep, at least if you keep them informed, you don't get the backlash as much. The town team, we kept them aware of critical dates for any traffic disruption, although this was minimised with the scaffolding. Brian did a street walk and part of Heritage Week, and we also did social media. The other thing is, common to some other people here in the audience, we are part of the residential occupancy pilot. So we would have been, I suppose, promoting the project through that project as well and presenting to the Joint Oireachtas Committee as a result of it. Other opportunities to project owners, so the building heritage structures, other funds that they could apply for themselves, or just in terms of grouping together to share the costs of a cherry picker for maintenance, that type of thing. So you do find you get an opportunity to encourage people to move on with their properties. As I say, the learning, originally we had in our tender a cherry picker, but the only way the contractor reckoned he could do it, considering there was a mix of work to be done, was to use scaffolding. So definitely it's a cost you have to build in up front, but it does mean that you have full access to the entire facade and the front roof slope, and you've no disruption to traffic. And a big thing is any of the owners where there's shops, and you can see there is a number of shops, they don't want that people can't go into their shop for a number of weeks or days or hours even. So the scaffolding makes a big difference. Colour selection, this is an example of after the colours. What was done was 1 or 2 colours were picked at the start, and then it was gradually seen, then painted, that the other colours were picked. So it wasn't all picked in block. So it was better to see how it was turning out. We would have individually, I met with the owners and discussed the colours, and a big thing as well is to be careful that if whatever the paint shop is in the town, that you use that, and we did, but otherwise it's very quick that you get a bad rep among the business community in the town. So just some samples there, the before pictures. So McNamara's house here, it was a subtle change, but it's kind of more toned down, and it's emphasising better the features of the building. It's a tiled front, some of them were fixed. Again, the next shop, the next premises, again, just some tidying up. A stronger colour on the next premises and door. There's somebody who had been keeping her property very well. The fourth property over there is actually the birth place of Maureen O'Hara, the actress, and that has really transformed in its appearance. Let's see some more. This property here, it was an old music shop, and a lot of timber splicing works had to be done on the repair. We were lucky that, unlike what Siobhan explained happened, we were able to do significant repairs to this shop, and I think it has made a massive difference, and it's a property now that the owner is likely to sell on. You also see on the door surrounds, a lot of them were brought back. The paint was taken off, a huge job, and I'd say the contractor was really feeling that that's where his any profit he could make on the job was going to disappear. But eventually, with the help of Michael Boyle, we were able to get some very good results on that. That's the property, Mourinho Harris. You can see a significant difference. Unfortunately, the curtains are still the same, but hopefully this year there'll be some improvements on the interior. You can see here that you can do so much with the outside, but like you don't go inside, and that's where you'd hope that building up a relationship with the owners on the street, that gradually we'll see some transformation internally as well. There you can see, I suppose, bringing back the character. An awful lot of our other town teams have gone and visited Boyle and come back with very positive comments. Under Town and Village, we're doing a paint scheme in Strokestown. It was purely to be a paint scheme, but from learning from this, two things we're going to change. One is we're going to get a conservation architect to pick the colours rather than, say, Dulux or a paint company, because they tend to go with very muted colours. And the second thing is that we're going to, because we have some scope within it, going to do some of the repairs that we did under HTI as well. So definitely it's been very positively received across the county. So that's it. Thank you.